Richard, we have had conversations about the PR industry's relationship with measurement. And last time you said, the PR industry, they need to wake up and they need to smell the coffee on measurement or risk irrelevance. And I wanted to know, you've been banging the drum about measurement for a long time now. Why is it so critical and important today more than ever?
It matters more than ever now because budgets are under huge pressure. There's so much global uncertainty, strife in the world, confidence amongst CFOs is an all-time low. The latest research from Deloitte looking at CFO confidence across Europe shows it's at the lowest it's been for a long time. It's no surprise. We've had a succession of bad events. Obviously, we have currently a hot war in Europe as well. We have scares on the stock market. We have cost of living crises. We have, many challenges are happening, which is creating a lack of certainty. And where there is no certainty, CFOs have a fiduciary responsibility to their businesses and their organizations to frankly protect cash. And when they want to do that, they stop spending money on anything that doesn't demonstrate value. Activity without value is a fool's job. It's useless. There's no point in doing it. You're just a busy fool if you're just busy and you're not actually able to demonstrate the value you're creating to your organization. And for far too long, despite repeated calls, the comms industry, or large parts of it, continue to just measure activity and not measure the outcomes. Now, right now, what we're seeing is there's more pressure on budgets, and so we're seeing people haven't been asked to do more with less. And that's creating an excuse that they go, well, it's too complicated to try and measure my value, so I'm just going to lean on these digital platforms that have proliferated that say that they measure effectiveness, and hopefully that will suffice. But of course, most of them are just also measuring activity. And of course, the activity they're measuring is coming from journalists who are also under pressure, the media that's also under pressure. And I think we really face a perfect storm. So it's time now, as AI becomes an ever bigger threat and dark cloud on the horizon, it's time now that we really do wake up and say, how on earth are we going to start talking to our value within the organization?
It feels like such a mindset shift, Richard. I had a conversation with a colleague probably a couple of years ago now, and the prelude to the conversation, we were both data freaks, and that's what we both said. But when I sat with them, they started talking about add value equivalencies, right. AVEs. They started talking about impressions and views and things like that. And what was running through my inner monologue, I never said it. My inner monologue was like seeing my friend coming out of a McDonald's and me thinking, I didn't know I was better than you. What necessitates the mindset shift that has to happen here?
I think one of them is feeling inferior when you're in a meeting with marketing colleagues, and the marketing colleagues, I think, as PR and comms professionals, we feel that they have all of the answers. I think another one is when we present our vanity metrics, AVEs, our impressions, those type of things, and we sort of expect a drum roll and that haven't we done well? And actually the person you're presenting to just asks the difficult questions, says, well, have you supported sales, or have you driven attendance at my event, or whatever it is that the organizational objective might have been. And we don't answer that question. So effectively we're made to look a bit stupid. Sometimes if we're just measuring quantitative things, and it happened to me years ago, because before I moved into measurement, I was a PR pro myself. And I went to see a client with a report. It had massive impression numbers in it. I thought this was pretty good. And the client, I can still remember it. The client said, well, hold on, that content, a whole raft of it, was actually saying some pretty negative stuff about us. And your report here is just counted the impressions. And it hasn't anything about the negative impact it's going to have. So I was made to look stupid. And actually, it's one of the reasons I ended up moving into measurement. It ignited my interest, was there has to be a better way of really understanding what it is we're achieving than that old thud factor of the clip books.
So, Richard, you've talked about how it isn't just about outputs, it's also outcomes and outtakes. And can you talk us through the difference of the outputs versus outtakes versus outcomes so that we just understand
Yeah.
the language, first of all?
Yeah, no, of course. Let's do that because I think that's really important. Look, and also let me explain up front. Um, I'm the guy who has spent a career in communications measurement and evaluation. I've been lucky to get to the top in the sector. But I'm also the guy, and here's a dirty secret for your listeners. I'm also the guy who to this day I'm pretty rubbish at Excel and I cannot build a pivot table.
The
So,
irony.
there you go. I'm a man of worth, and perhaps writing. I'm not really a data man myself, and I think that's one of the things that holds us back. And it's this fear that we have of data, and there's also, we can come on to it perhaps later, but the fear of being found out that really holds us back. And I think what I've been able to do, hopefully, and I hopefully be able to do it today, is help people understand, to simplify what to many of us we think is complicated. So let's start with what you're talking about there, Farzana. So outputs, outtakes, and outcomes is the order that we'd normally look at it in. Outputs is the word that the measurement industry uses to describe the stuff that is generated by the work that we do and different ways of measuring it. So depending on our work, and of course PR and comms is so multi-varied and multifunctional, but depending what we're doing, it might be, if you're doing internal comms, it might be emails that you're sending out. But if we're doing external comms, it's going to be the number of press releases we're sending out, the number of articles that are generated, the number of pieces of content we put on our homepage, obviously with digital and social media content as well, and the ways that we do the content evaluation. These are all outputs. So that will be impressions. Doug, you talked about AVEs. I hope we're not using them, but if you are, AVEs is an output metric.
People still are.
Yeah, I know. Well, I know. Not as many as were, which is the good news, but that some people still are, and they need to urgently wake up and realize that it's an invalid metric. But these are the output metrics. They're the counts and amounts, and they're where the vanity metrics tend to sit. Moving up the value chain of what an organization cares about is from the stuff that we do, the outputs. Next up that value chain, if you like, or if you think about it moving down the funnel, is what do people think? Are they, now they've been exposed to our stuff, what do they now think? Are they aware? Have they changed their mind? What's their perception of our reputation? Has that changed? So outtakes, at its most simplest, I like to say, is basically what people think. And outcomes is, having thought about something, what do people then do? And is that, have they bought a product? Have they attended an event? Have they not done something that would have perhaps been catastrophic for our organization? So we prevented something from happening. That, all those things are an outcome. And when we can link those three things together, so the outputs, the stuff, the outtakes, what people think, and the outcomes, what people have done, then we can start talking about the organizational impact, which is what our C-suite and our leaders really care about. And so the great art of measurement is identifying a problem, a challenge that we had, understanding with a benchmark, where are we before we begin to try and solve this challenge, and then saying, okay, how can I thread through my plan, my activity, the stuff that happened, the outputs, the outtakes and the outcomes, what people thought and what people did, to talk about organizational impact. And so world-class evaluation really is storytelling, which of course is what PR and comms professionals are so good at. And it's about threading those things together to tell that story of the great value that we provide for our clients. And I just want to say one more thing. I realize that's quite a long answer, but outtakes and outcomes causes a fair bit of confusion with people. And the explanation I gave of outtakes, some people would argue with. And I prefer that we think of outtakes and outcomes together, because people get confused by the two different things. Because an outtake, i.e. what people are thinking, can be an outcome. If your communications challenge is to make people more aware, and you have made them more aware, that is an outcome. So, I'm very happy for people to group outtakes and outcomes together, but do think of outputs as distinct. Outputs are the activity metrics, and outtakes and outcomes are on the other side of that. They're the what happened next, and it's the what happened next that our organization cares about.
I love this, because really what you're saying is the true measurement of a communication effort is the do. What did they do? The action, or did they stop doing the thing they were doing before? And that's the point of professional comms.
The point, I would say but I want to be really clear on this as well. I'm not urging anybody to dispense with output metrics. We still need to measure our activity.
Fair.
But we need to measure our activity and link it to the what happened next. And the problem with most PR measurement is we stop at activity and we say, ta-da, we've done all of this. And it leaves the big question of so what and now what?
Right.
We measure the what, but we don't answer the so what and the now what.
You mentioned the think, the what did they know, then what did they do? But a bigger part of what they did was what they felt.
Yeah.
What are some ways to measure the way people feel? So I don't want to just wait for them to do the action. If I'm running an election campaign, it's too late. By the time the vote is held, all my comms efforts, I can evaluate real well for next time, but I can't fix it part way.
Yeah.
How do I measure the feel? And the reason I'm asking that is because I think surveys are completed aspirationally. I think people answer things like surveys the way they wish they would be, instead of what the action they're truly going to take. So what are some tools or some methods to measure the feel to better predict what the outcome is going to be?
Yeah. I think your thoughts around aspirational answers on surveys is a really interesting one and an important one. And I don't necessarily disagree with you. Drive behaviors. And the most effective populist democratic leaders are experts in driving emotional response to get normal thinking people to do things that perhaps they wouldn't normally have thought or done. So measuring emotions is really important. Now there are ways of measuring emotions in terms of you can look at different emotions, particularly ones that drive response, things like fear being one of them, anxiety being another. You can bucket multiple emotions and you can bucket them. There's a lot of research showing which have a stronger pull on us emotionally, against which we will be less sort of affected by. You can bucket them and you can measure them in terms of content that's being pushed out, content that our audiences are actually putting out themselves, and by doing research amongst people. Because although you say aspirational, I think when you do focus group type research, people will say not necessarily what they want you to hear or they think they want you to hear. Now, I think that's one of the problems with social media measurement and analytics is there's many problems with social media measurement and analytics and thinking that you're actually getting a representative view of your audiences. Our audiences are very polarized, and there isn't such a thing anymore as one cohesive audience that all thinks one thing. We all think slightly different perspectives. But if the people who are noisy on social media are one particular group of humans, there's a lot of lurkers who don't say anything, and frankly, there's a lot of people who've left social media altogether. So there's a challenge there. If you go on to X and you're not being provocative, and I hardly ever go on X or Twitter anymore, but when I did, I only ever talked about PR measurement and communications evaluation. And I never talked about the real Richard, about the days when I was happy, the days when I was furious, or why it might have been. I might very occasionally have suggested something on my Facebook page, but even there, I wouldn't put it there because it's not the real you. But where do people go and present their real self? Perhaps a self that even my wife might not know or my parents might not know. And that tends to be into Google. Well, it certainly used to be into Google. I don't feel well. There's a weird lump in my arm. Have I got, cancer, whatever? Those fears and those issues that I wouldn't necessarily want to be public about are asked search engines. So it is possible to look at what people are searching for on search engines to start to get a feel for what people are really thinking. More and more, of course, people are now looking to what you might call answer engines, so AI-generated answers from Perplexity and etc. ChatGPT, etc. And there are beginning to be ways that people can start to interrogate the type of things that are being asked. And I think very interestingly, from a PR and comms perspective, where the answers are coming from. But research into this space is still very early and still shows quite different numbers depending who it is who've done the research. But what it clearly shows to me is the importance of PR and comms in terms of influencing reputations that are being made and lost through answer engine answers.
So I think it's a really valid point, because actually, I think who knows me the best? I think ChatGPT knows me better than my own husband.
And Meta. Yeah.
Right? I mean, and also just these algorithms. I mean, you're sort of thinking, oh, I want to buy something, and then all of a sudden it pops up on your Instagram, and it's almost sort of preemptive. It's extraordinary. Now, I got a question for you, Richard, because I get why we need to measure. I get that, it's the money men and women that we need to convince for our value to unlock those budgets. I get the difference between outputs and outcomes and outtakes. But what I wanted to understand is both in-house and agency, there isn't always sufficient empathy in terms of unlocking resources for measurement. And measurement isn't a binary. You go the full hog or none at all. Now, what I wanted an answer from you is, how do people who don't have the ability to set up huge measurement departments and unlock, budgets from clients or, in-house, how can they use free resources? Like you mentioned, AMEC has a framework. So for those people who are doing the basics in terms of outputs and want to step up, step by step, what can they do? Where can they go to? How can they sort of start at a basic level and then build up their ability to learn how to measure more effectively with impact, and what resources are out there to help them and guide them, but with a realistic lens that people are busy and they've barely got enough time in the day to finish their tasks, and just that realistic lens.
Yeah. It's a very fair question, and pretty wide-ranging one as well. First of all, you shouldn't do anything that you're not planning and you're not measuring. You wouldn't get in your car and drive to the shop and not check that you're not about to drive into a pedestrian. You measure your journey the whole way. You check you got some fuel, your tire's not flat. We are planning in terms of thinking, well, I'm going to go to the shop. That's the route I'm going to take, and we are measuring ourselves in real time all day long, and doing any kind of activity that costs money and costs time and costs effort at work should be the same. Has to be the same. But I get the point that people don't have much money to spend on all bells and all whistles, and it doesn't have to be expensive. So the important thing, and I would always advocate for this, in fact, I've just been talking to a massive global company whose measurement is not where they want it to be, and it's not about going from not where we want it to be being world class. Well, it is, but it's about doing that in baby steps and literally going crawl, walk, run. And I think that's how everyone should go. To your American listeners, many of you may remember an old colleague of mine, a chap called Mark Wiener, who very well known on the US evaluation stage. Sadly, Mark passed away about 18 months ago. But Mark he had a turn of phrase which I thought was so good about begin simply, but simply begin. If you're not doing anything, just start. Just begin simply. So if you've really got no budget and you're really doing nothing, begin with just some basic outputs. Let's understand just some simple things about what it is we're trying to do. Let's make sure we've thought about our audience. What do they read, watch, and listen to? Who are they influenced by? And let's just do some quantitative counts and amounts to say, you know what, we wanted to reach these people. We got 30 clips and, whatever it might be, make some numbers up. Then we want to start moving a bit further up that value chain. So how do we do it? Well, there's loads of free ways of getting information. So getting data out of Google, you can do it in different clever ways. You can use the Google Search Console, for example. You can even use the preemptive search when you type into the search bar and it drops, to see what people are looking for.
Mm-hmm, mm-hmm.
You can do it on your Chrome right now. One of my great colleagues she's a consultant for us at Comms Clarity, but she's also an AMEC board director, Steph Bridgman. She did a great webinar for AMEC recently on low cost and no cost evaluation tips. So rather than me regurgitating that's on AMEC's website. It's on YouTube. I'd point your readers to Steph's podcast. YouTube session on how to measure in a low and no cost way. Katie Payne, the queen of measurement as she's called in the US, Katie talks about creating a kick butt index. This is something that you can do for free. Kick butt index in Katie's language is about trying to create a little score of how effective your comms is. Again, focus very much on your outputs. Then we want to understand what we've achieved. Well, if we're a small organisation, we can normally start to look at what's happened as a result. We need to make friends with our web developers, the people who hold some of the data. If we're at a charity and not for profit, then we need to make friends with the people who understand not just who's coming to our website, but donations and that type of stuff. And then let's start to get some data sets into Excel and just start to look and see if we can do some pattern recognition. In fact, you don't even need, well, you do need Excel, but once you've done it, you don't even need to do a correlation there. You can ask ChatGPT to do it, frankly, and it will do a pretty good job on it for you. Begin simply begin. Then moving up that value chain, there are ways to do survey research to start understanding what people think, that outtake stuff, and to do that quickly and cost effectively. There's very expensive ways of doing it. There's much cheaper ways of doing it. There are whole new techniques of doing it. There's an exciting development in the sector is around what's called synthetic audiences. So this is where challenges to the old market research companies that used to charge an arm and a leg to do survey work, and it took ages to get information, now have a synthetic audience. So it's real research, but they've grouped it together, and then effectively through a large language model, you can ask it questions, and you can do things like pre-testing and post-testing or certainly pre-testing of how do you think this headline would work? What would the audience likely respond to this? Yeah, and you get it really quickly. You get it in real time. Now, if I was launching a new car brand, I wouldn't count on that to give me insights to make a multi-billion-pound strategic decision. But if I wanted some quick information just to guide me and to help me think stuff through, what a great idea. So you've got cheap and clever ways of getting outtake information. You've got ways of getting outcome information by making friends with different departments. I'm amazed how many comms teams say it's impossible to get data from other departments within my business. And I think we're in a bit of a chicken and egg situation. I think other departments won't give the information because they don't think that PR and comms people deserve it, because PR and comms people have never been able to point to what they do. So I think there we need to have a conversation and say, I need your help for me to be able to demonstrate the value of the work that I'm doing. And of course, we have to not overclaim at this point. We can't, not everything that happens has happened because of us. But you know what? And perhaps this is a big message to our audience, is we've always had an inferiority complex. We think marketing's got all the answers. We think advertising's got all rubbish. Rubbish, rubbish, rubbish. No, they don't. They actually are just as insecure as we are. The worst thing that ever happened was Google and Google Analytics with its last click attribution. And so suddenly all of this sort of effect of why things happen goes against the last click. It's total nonsense. I can't think of anything I have ever bought that has come about purely because I have just seen an advert and gone, you know what, I've never heard of that, and now I think I'm going to click. I will go and research something before I buy it. And the higher up the value chain you go, the more you will do that. And that's where reputation, that's where we come in.
Yeah, Google has like a 14-step process that it says people follow before they take an action.
There you go. Well done, Google. Don't think, and do you recognize the 14 steps that you go through every single time? I mean, all of these processes, right? So, you know, we think that they have the answers, but they don't. And half the time they're winging it, all of these organizations anyway. So we need to have the confidence to say, look, here was the challenge. This is what I did. This is what happened. This is the content I generated, the stuff. This is what people now think. Yes, they could have been affected by other things as well. This is what they've now done. Yes, absolutely. That's not just us that's created that. It's a combination of effects. Could even be the weather, right? If you're Coca-Cola, it will include the weather if your sales go up or down. Which, of course, is at the heart of what market mix modeling is. So let's take these factors. Let's just take these data points. Let's tell the measurement story. Let's look to correlate it. And let's say, this is what's happened, and effectively draw your own conclusions on how much effect you want to put against this. We don't have to overclaim, but we shouldn't underclaim either. And that's always been our problem. It's a
correlation is fair. Completely agree. Richard, we could do 2 episodes here. Really appreciate your time today.
Oh, it's been, as our time flown by, it's been great fun. I've enjoyed it.
That
Thank
fast.
you for having me.
Yeah.